Okay, we are live.
Hey.
Good afternoon, family. For those of y'all who are joining us on the social media, I'm going to give y'all an opportunity to like and share the video, tell some people to come along. We're going to have a very important conversation. Of course, we're going to be recording this. We are recording this for WRFG Radio, the Ancestral
Mhm.
Rock, which airs every Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m. So before I introduce our very special guest, I want to ask you all, anyone who's viewing this, go ahead and like and share the video. Let people know we're on, so we can continue to discuss our liberation. As our Nana Dr. John Henry Clark said, anything that is not towards our liberation, we throw it in the trash bin of history. And we take those instructions very seriously. So whether we're talking about fun times or challenging times or anything in between, that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are focused on our liberation. Um, and, and that looks so many different ways in so many different contexts. And there's a golden stream thread that runs through all of it. So just going to give y'all a second to like and share the video while I pull something up. And I'm going to introduce our special guest who's going to help us navigate some current realities that we're still, as a human race, attempting to figure out and do what's right by ourselves and our children. Um, it's an opportunity. We here have another golden opportunity in our hands, and this one is called the global climate crisis. It's a serious thing. It's a serious thing. So go ahead and like and share the video. I'm pulling up something on my computer, so I'm going to attempt to share the screen with y'all in a minute and let y'all see something wonderful. But I don't want to take too much time. I want to introduce our special guest. Um, we're grateful for her taking the time to be with us, and I know that it's going to be a powerful conversation. Powerful because when we feel empowered to make change, when we feel empowered to be ourselves, there's not too much more we can ask from the universe. So definitely looking forward to that. I'm going to just share this with some friends and ask y'all to do the same. And let's get into the business at hand. Let's get into the business at hand. Um, Today in our world, there are so many things happening. Yesterday, I was on social media for a little while and I saw somebody talking about, in another news, World War III just kicked off. That's a grim picture to paint. And I'm not laughing about it. It's just it is what it is. But there's so much that's happening on a daily basis that takes us to that fork in the road where we can just kind of throw our arms up, throw in the towel, or take a sober look and keep on moving. So that's what I really appreciate about our guest. She's a very practical person, a pragmatic person. I've only known her for a little while in terms of human years, but it seems like we have an ancient connection, and I can see that she's definitely, what I would say, true to her profession. She's a climate scientist. So people who work in that field have to be practical. And then it begs the question: well, what does practical really mean? Does practical mean we always see the glass half empty or half full, or what does that look like? But she's also a cultural worker. I just recently attended a powerful event, an annual event that she's a co-curator of, called the Algiers Ancestor Festival. And I thought it was very profound that during one of the presentations, it was mentioned again that we're doing this because we are talking about climate change, and they're talking about ancestry, and even locally placing it in the New Orleans, Algiers area, and putting that in that context one may think, well, what the hell I got to do with climate change? And so I love the fact that they connect the dots and help us to see ourselves in the process. She also is one of the co-founders of Breath is Life and works with the Sierra Club on the front lines in terms of attempting to navigate some of this global climate crisis. So we're very honored to welcome you today to the studio, Dr. Cherelle Blazer. Thank you
Thank
for
you for
joining
having
us
me.
again.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
So
Um,
last time we spoke, you were last time we spoke, live. You were, I want to say, in Dubai. This
yeah,
was
the same
about a
time
year
here.
ago. Yes.
Yep, that's right.
So much has happened since then. I can only imagine. So I want to
Yeah,
see if you can get us up to date. But just for starters, just for the people who were not privy to that conversation, I want to ask you to be gentle with us and speak to
sure.
us like we're second graders in terms of just helping us to define some terminology because there's so much in the age of misinformation that gets just thrown all over the place. So
Sure.
let's just start with climate change. As obvious as that may seem, what to you is climate change? What does that really speak to?
I mean, so to me, climate change. I mean, first of all, it's just a term. It's a political term.
Hmm.
We used to say global warming, and now it's climate change. And before then, I don't know what they were calling it, but basically, it's what it's referring to is differences in the environment beyond which we can live comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it's referring to, right? So because the climate is always changing, it always has. But the question now is the frequency and the kind of change one in which is hospitable to life on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And to the degree that it is not, that's what we call climate change or the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's clear. I appreciate it. I think I told you one time um, in jest that old country farmer that I know, he owns, I'm not going to call his name out here. He may
Sure.
be listening, but
Yeah.
he he owns a feed and seed store that I frequent often. And we were talking about climate change one day. We were just talking about, we always trade farm stories.
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, this climate change is real. And he said, yeah, man, the climate has always been changing. We used to have an ice age, and that's
Yeah.
something that people kind of just say that, and they are usually put in the category these days of climate deniers.
Right. Well,
Um,
I mean, here's the thing. There was an ice age, and, many species didn't make it through that.
mm,
So, yeah, that's a good example
mm,
of extreme climate change and why, we want to do the best that we can. I like the way that you framed it for ourselves and for our children and for future generations.
right. And there was a word, and it's skipping me right now. I'm asking you to help me out.
Mm.
That is kind of a goal that has been set by climate activists around the world. So if we can reach this, is it net zero or something like that?
Net zero. Oh, there's a bunch. And these are political terms.
Hmm.
These are it's trying to merge what the world scientists have told politicians
Hmm.
that we have to do,
Hmm.
right? Because it's not enough just to study this. We've been studying climate change for decades.
Hmm.
It's well defined, it's well known, um, but the question is, what is the political will to make the changes necessary for um, life to continue?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so then, yeah, net zero is something that politicians came up with.
Mm,
Um, and from what I understand, so I'll just describe the plan.
please do.
Okay. So this 1.5 degrees, right? So the world scientists said 1.5 degrees of warming is the window in which we can still live comfortably. Anything beyond that, we slip into what's called loss and damage or crisis mode. Right? When there's loss of life, there's loss of livelihoods, there's loss of habitat and species and all these things, right? But at 1.5 degrees of warming, we can adapt to that and still live pretty comfortably. Um, and the point is to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees, right? This little window that life can still continue in comfortably, and then get to net zero where we're not emitting more carbon than the environment can absorb. So if you get to net zero with carbon, then you're not going to have any additional warming. And the reason why you don't want to have any additional warming is because there is a lag time in the atmosphere.
All right.
Oh, okay.
It's funny because I don't want to disclose my location, but we just had a perfect example of some of the ramifications of global climate change. We just had a blackout in a place where it's having a lot of energy issues and everything. But the last thing I heard you say, again, we're talking to Dr. Cherelle Blazer. Thank y'all for keeping with us. Was 1.5 degrees is the that's when we lost you.
Oh goodness. Okay, I was just talking. Okay. Okay. All right. So yes, 1.5 degrees of warming is the amount of warming that we can sustain, right?
Mhm.
Um, that we can adapt to
Mhm.
before we go into different crises like um, you, frequent storms and weather phenomenon and desertification of places and all that.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's a lag time in the atmosphere, and uh, if we can stop emitting more carbon than the atmosphere or than our environment can absorb, then we get to net 0 degrees of warming. And
Mhm.
at that point, the atmosphere will actually begin to cool.
Mhm.
Right. So, these systems, and you understand natural systems, these systems actually correct themselves. And
Mhm.
so, if we can get to net zero, if we can hold at 1.5 degrees of warming
Mhm.
and achieve net zero by 2030, and again, that's arbitrary.
Mhm.
That was what the politicians decided was enough time for governments to get themselves together,
The
right?
politicians decided that.
Well, yeah, it takes political will. These countries have to decide that they're going to change their economies to ones that are not based on fossil fuels and that are not carbon based,
Right.
right?
And I asked that because, not to cut your flow, but
Sure.
I wonder what were the scientists proposing? Like, get it done
Oh,
yesterday.
oh yes, yesterday, right? Yesterday. Because I mean, what we're dealing with now, what the phenomenon that we're dealing with now in this climate crisis is from carbon that was emitted 20, 30 years ago.
Mm, mm,
Right? So that's still in the atmosphere and
mm,
still warming and causing havoc.
mm,
Um, so, what we were talking about back in, 1970 is what we are being affected by
mm,
now.
mm.
And so what we're emitting now is what will be affecting the climate in 2050.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's clear.
So, yeah, so that's why 2030 is an arbitrary thing that was put forward for all the world's governments to say, yes, okay, we think that's long enough for us to get to this point of net zero.
Mm.
And if that's the case, then there will be actual cooling of the atmosphere by 2050. And if we're able to hold to that 1.5 degrees, then there shouldn't be, too much loss of life and habitat and, all these things, all these systems. Earth systems should be able to repair themselves.
So when you say, and I've asked you this before, but just for the sake of
Sure.
our family, when you say 1.5 degrees, the layperson in me just means, okay, well, right now it's 85 degrees in Arizona. So
Sure.
once it doesn't get above 86.5 degrees, we okay. What do you mean by that 1.5 degree?
1.5 degrees of warming. So there is a range, right, by which most places experience temperatures, right? So
Mm.
let's say in New Orleans, in general, in the and, and my neighbor is doing their lawn. Is it loud? Like
Oh
they
no,
use
you're good.
good. Okay. Um,
Your neighbor seems to have perfect timing. I remember us having an interview before.
every time.
He must got a radar. Let's see. That's hilarious.
That is so funny. Okay, so um, let's say in general, historically, New
Mhm.
Orleans, the hottest it'll get here is around 85 in the summer. And let's say the coolest it will be is you might get down to around 45 in general in the winter,
Oh wow.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe for like 1 week. Okay, so there's a historic range, right? And so everywhere has a historic range.
Right.
Now, the degree by which we are outside of that historic range
Mhm.
is this warming trend, right? And the Earth has been experiencing a warming trend. Like in general, on average, all over the world, there is, you know, uh, a warming trend that happens.
Mhm.
Now, as you know, because you travel around and you've been many places, there are winners and losers in this. This is an average.
Mhm.
So someone who lives in North Dakota might be like, it feels great.
Mhm.
I'm not experiencing any, any warming of any kind. But if you live near the equator, or if you live somewhere that's already, fairly volatile,
Mhm.
that 1.5 degrees can be
Makes a world of
catastrophic.
difference. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Absolutely.
right. So what was once farmland might become desert. What
Yes.
was once, right? What was once the ocean, which absorbs
Mhm.
heat, when it warms up, that's when you start to get um, more frequent storms and fish kills
Hmm.
and yeah, all these things, right? So this 1.5 degrees is really wreaking havoc with Earth's systems
Hmm.
because we're not meant to be as warm as we are. Like even here in New Orleans right now, last week it was 80 degrees. It was 80 degrees. It's November.
Hmm.
Actually, on Monday it was 80 degrees here. Um, but let's say that's okay, I'm getting into the weeds now, but it affects so many different systems, including disease,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? So, yeah, vectors of disease. You get disease in places now where there used to be a hard freeze that
Hmm.
would kind of clear the palate, of the environment, and now there
Hmm.
is none,
Right.
right? And you get different new pests, you get different kinds of disease, you get animals that used to live in that habitat that can no longer deal with
Hmm.
you know the sustained heat that's so
Absolutely.
historically different than
In,
what they're used to
in
living in.
Atlanta, we're experiencing the same thing. I mean, as you know, I'm a grower, and right
Yes.
now, I remember when we were doing the traditional preparation for the winter crops and everything, and people, one of my brothers texted me one day. I was on the other side of town, like he's harvesting before the frost. I'm like, huh? I panicked. I'm like, what are you talking about? And this was just a false prediction or whatever, but because I had been paying attention to the weather. But the whole point is that we know that traditionally by this time we would have had the first frost. There's certain foods that you have to get in the ground early, like
Yeah.
around late July, early August, so that they can be strong enough. Like people like the collard greens, where a
Yeah.
little frost hit them to get them nice and tender. This is out the door now, and I remember saying to me, like, I don't, my spidey sense doesn't tell me that we're gonna even have a frost before Thanksgiving,
Wow.
and that's
Wow.
what it is. And so, as you say, I can absolutely identify how, on one level, that gives us room because it also is a reflection of the fact that we had a shorter season on the other side because it got so warm early and all this. So there's all kind of stuff that as growers we can say, okay, well, this is good, but it's not good. It
Right.
doesn't. It's scary when you think
Yeah.
about the fact that I'm wearing a T-shirt in the middle of December and all this kind of stuff. Unless
Absolutely.
I'm somewhere where I'm supposed to be in the tropics. You know what I'm saying? So
Ab-
even so, I want to ask you something regarding the global warming,
yeah.
um, because the word warming stands out. So
Right.
most of us just see like, okay, well, this is what's happening. The Earth is going to get hotter and hotter. The ice caps are melting in the North Pole, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
We're also seeing snow in the Sahara Desert for the first time, and in Saudi Arabia.
Oh wow.
Uh,
Okay.
I mean, this was recently. I saw pictures of this, and
Mm.
so I'm wondering, like, is that also, to your knowledge, is that something different happening, or this all related to
It's
this
the same
extreme?
thing. It's climate change. Yes, it's climate change, and like you just named, it's extremes,
Mm,
right? The Earth's systems are being thrown off, including climate,
mm,
and you're getting extremes in weather
mm,
phenomena.
mm.
That's exactly right.
We're talking to Dr. Cherelle Blazer of Breath is Life. As we said, she wears many crowns, all around black magic woman who's been
Thank you.
representing our global community, really representing the people of the earth who want to be here and enjoy this beautiful planet. Um, at many different in many different forums, including some of these global climate conferences. So last time we spoke, you were in Dubai, and
Yeah,
then recently, when we had planned for an interview but we couldn't do it, I think you were in Nigeria at a climate summit.
I
Tell us about
was.
tell us
Yeah.
about how that was.
Okay, so I was in the Niger Delta,
Mm-hmm.
in Ogoni Land, River State, Nigeria,
Ogoni
and
Land.
yeah,
Oh wow! So not to cut you, but when you
sure.
say Ogoni Land, that takes me back to the Ogoni Nine. Some people may not remember that.
Yes.
It's Ken Saro Riwa and a bunch of other people
Yes.
who were murdered when they were attempting to stop Shell with their. Oh wow! I just got chills. I didn't even know about Ogoni Land. Go ahead, please.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Okay. I would love for you to tell that that story, give some background on that. But
Mhm.
yeah, so those same people are still in the same struggle
Mm.
against Shell. And so it was a 5-day conference that was put together by a local group called the Leke Development Foundation. And it was really nice. I mean, it was a great conference. It was well attended by the community and by, like all the local students. They had a lot of local um, experts, so many local experts. It's really interesting when you travel across Africa and especially Nigeria, when you realize how highly educated people are.
Mm-hmm.
Like they may be doing things like running a shop
Mm-hmm.
or driving a cab. But these people have like PhDs, and it's really, in general, the education level of the population is just really high.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, we talked about climate change. We talked about petrochemicals and oil and gas. It was very much like being in Louisiana, where I am now, right? All of the same issues like you might find on the Gulf Coast of the US. Very similar. And we experienced climate change while we were there. We experienced some crisis. It rained, they had torrential rains,
Mm.
and everything flooded every single day. Well, I have to say three days it flooded. You
Mm.
couldn't drive. It was all those things. They deal with subsidence like we do, with like the land sinking because of the pumping.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, they've had to come up with all kinds of ways to adapt to the changes in the environment, the fishing community there, and the farming community. So I was not working with them. I was documenting some of the adaptation processes that they'd come up with to survive, what's happened to the environment, what Shell has done to the environment there.
So
And
is this
then
from offshore drilling, or are they drilling on land?
both. It's
So
both.
no, no, I mean, again, not to cut you. Please
No,
keep your train
please.
of thought, because I come from Guyana, South America,
Yeah.
which is below sea level,
Yeah.
and as the world has now discovered, Guyana is one of the leading exports for oil, from
Yeah.
through Exxon, and that's
Unbelievable.
always been something that's been. So when you're talking about the subcision, I guess that's the word,
Yeah.
of the
Subsistence.
land,
Yeah.
that's very scary.
It's extremely scary because these places, like you said, they're already under sea level, and it really exacerbates all of the flooding that happens.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then I went, you hear about these oil spills in Ogoniland, and I went to one, and it was I've never experienced such toxicity.
Mm.
Completely open. It smelled like I was inside of a gas tank.
Mm.
I got lightheaded. I became nauseous. I would say my cognitive ability was off for a little
Mm.
while. And I've studied this for a really long time, so I immediately knew my symptoms, and I started documenting everyone else's in the group, their symptoms as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what we're gonna do with that, but I mean, it was just, I mean, the scientist in me was like, okay, you need to document this,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and the remedial way that they were cleaning this oil spill.
This is a multinational corporation doing this,
Yes.
not people with a
Yes.
small budget.
Oh my gosh. They weren't doing any cleaning at all. So all the mangroves had died off. There wasn't any life in the river anymore. And all of the farmers, all the farming that used to happen there, they did not. It makes me so angry when I talk about it. They did not relocate the farming community. They did not compensate them for the loss of land and livelihood. They gave these farmers jobs cleaning up the oil spill, where they make very little money and they have no safety equipment. These men are
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you.
It was
It's
one of the
a,
worst things I'd ever seen in my life.
it's a cycle of devastation.
It was one of the worst things I'd seen in my life. Yeah, they didn't have any real technology to clean this up.
Mhm.
They weren't given any safety equipment. They were just there in the toxicities. And this is not what these people do, right? These are people who were farmers, who tended to the land, who brought food and life, and and just the fact that now what they're reduced to doing, and we're giving no other option. I'm still so angry even talking about it. And I don't know what needs to happen there, but I'm trying to work with some folk in the local community to see what we can do to right this wrong, because I
It's
was
ridiculous.
disgusted. I was
So
disgusted.
other than yourself, what type of people were at this conference? Who was the audience? Who was there and what was?
It was mostly locals,
Mhm.
students. There were a few people from outside of Africa, but not very many. There was a group of farming folk from the UK. There was myself and one other climate scientist from the US that now works and lives in South Africa. So most of the folk around there were they were local, most of them.
And did you get the sense of clearly there's a sense of what's the word I want to use? There's a deep sense of courage, and there's a word that's slipping me right now in terms of being able to sustain themselves and live through this because that happened. The
Yeah.
Ogoni nine assassinations and everything happened in the late 80, no, early 90s, I believe,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. I mean, so these people are still there. They're still the same perpetrator is still there
Mhm.
dealing with this mess. Resilience is the word I was looking for in terms of
Ah,
the human spirit.
I hate that word, resilient.
Right. it, it's not. It's like a compliment that you don't want to get. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you? What I'm asking though is, did you get a sense of the ingenuity being able to manifest itself? People finding a new way to handle this since they're dealing with this big monster that clearly
No.
doesn't care, clearly is not being held accountable.
Right.
So
Clearly not being held accountable.
mm,
No, I didn't find that. I mean, people survive. People
mm,
can survive all kinds of terrible conditions.
right.
And that's what these people are doing. They're surviving. I wouldn't call it resilient, because they're not thriving. And they're sustaining so much loss of land, of habitat, of livelihood, all these things, of culture, of their way of life. It's been completely interrupted by this multinational corporation. So no, I wouldn't call it resilient. They're not coming back from
Mm.
the harm that's been done to them.
Yeah, because as you're
They,
talking, I'm wondering about what are the health stats? Like,
oh my
what are we
God.
seeing in terms of
And
now
there are no
a
hospitals. There are no
generation?
hospitals that can deal with. Yeah. So no, um, cancer has been on the rise, and there are no major hospitals that can treat people for their, you know,
Mm.
petrochemical associated diseases.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
as you said, this is taking you right home to the Gulf area where you live, New Orleans. Where they
Very
call
much so.
Cancer Alley and everything.
Very
And,
much so.
I was sharing the other day with some people about there's an excellent documentary called Dirt, the movie that I highly recommend. The
Mm,
part of the movie, the whole thing is about the sacredness of soil, and not
mm,
just a symbolic sacredness, but a very practical reality of our Mama Earth, and
yeah.
this top layer of her skin that we call the soil, which sustains us basically. But in a nutshell, they were talking about how big ag in its selfish way,
Mhm.
in the global capital mentality that still exists, that was existing in the time of our physical bondage, during the mafia, and still exists right now, even with
Yeah.
more impunity. You know what I'm saying? Um, in the Midwest region of the United States, how so much of these chemical inputs are just dumped into the soil time and time and time again, and these go into the waterways, which lead into the Mississippi River eventually, which
Mhm.
lead downstream to the Gulf of Mexico, which
That
creates
dead
this
zone.
nitrous, yeah, oxide and everything, where there's no fish that can live there, only
Yeah.
jellyfish. And also, going back to what you were talking about, waters warming. I mean, a clue that I got as a grower here in Atlanta that we ain't gonna get a frost so soon is
Mm.
that when what was that hurricane? Was it Helen, the one that just came through and
Yeah.
all the way to North Carolina? When we
Yeah.
were talking about how the Gulf waters were still so warm,
Yeah.
that of course this is going to help to develop the momentum of a big storm.
Absolutely.
And because we know, I mean, again, the traditional, I'm only 25 years young, but even in my lifetime, the traditional season
Yeah.
is like we can start planting our greens in the southeast late July, early August, and we can depend on those hurricane rains that can come through the
Mm.
Gulf of Mexico to help to water our crops.
Yeah.
And then I remember in the last 10 years how September became the hottest
Wow.
the
Yeah.
hottest month on record.
Yeah.
I mean, of the calendar every year. So this thing is something that's very real. We're talking with Dr. Cherelle Blazer, and she's giving us an update. It's a very grim update in
Oh,
some
I'm
ways.
sorry.
Oh no, no, nothing to be sorry about. This is the reality. This
Uh,
is the reality, because I know there's another side to it where we're getting to in terms of
absolutely.
what humans have done, humans can do. As
Right.
Marcus Garvey said, we have to be able to look at stuff squarely in the eye,
Mm.
and so we can really deal with it properly.
Yeah.
Instead of the placebo thing. Instead of the
Mm.
placebo effect. As you are, I know you are. I am very well, much as well, a very spiritual person.
Yeah.
And for me, spirituality is not escapism.
Right.
That's something we're talking about, something very different there. so,
Yes.
so I'm grateful for you, joining us to help to give us a little bit of that soberty, so we can
Mm.
really invoke our ashe for real, and make some
Good.
changes. Let's get.
I love that.
I want to get a little bit more personal for a minute, because
Mm.
as we say, you don't know the history of if you don't know the history of the author, you don't know what you read. So,
Mm.
what brought you into this work? I mean, I just was remarking that the post or the picture I used as the thumbnail for this post, you're at the beach enjoying yourself. You remind me of so many of my beautiful sisters all over the world who just, they have so much talent and so much they offer to the world. What brought you into this work?
I grew up with an immense amount of anxiety,
Mm,
actually, um, in New Orleans, because you know petrochemicals.
hmm
Right? I was acutely aware
hmm
that people in my surroundings and my family were dying young,
mm,
really young, like no gray hair, no, you know what I mean? Like really young people getting cancer. And one of my closest friends, so when I was young, back then you didn't just send your kids off to school.
mm,
People would keep each other's children. And so I was staying with my grandparents and right next door. So I had all these cousins and aunts and uncles, and we all lived in the same neighborhood. And so next door to my grandmother, whom I was living with, who I'm staying with, um, was my cousin Felix. And he was home. I didn't realize he was home because he was sick. But when when my grandparents were working, I would go over there after school or on the weekends, or if I didn't have school, and hang out with Felix. We would play tea party and we would watch cartoons and we would just talk. And he was my best friend
Mm,
growing up. And then one day he wasn't there anymore. And
mm,
I didn't realize it was because he was ill that we spent all this time together. So we were kind of like looking after each other in a way.
mm,
Um, but that was such a jarring experience that I was just like, I realized that whoever controls the air and the water controls everything about your life,
mhm,
your quality of life, all these things. And I just became obsessed with, now this is odd for a child, but I became obsessed with what is in the air, what is in the water. I became obsessed with chemistry as a child.
mm,
This idea, you know how you watch the sun and then you see those little sun fuzzies, you know what I mean?
mm,
So I would like watch the sun come in through a window and I would see all these little particles and I'd be like, what are those things? What is this? I'm breathing this in. It's in that sunbeam, it's in the air. What are these things and what are they doing to us? And so that's what I wanted to study when I went to school. Um, I loved chemistry. I loved science. I loved understanding why things work the way that they work.
mm,
And yeah,
mm. Yeah, I feel you. No, I mean that's a powerful testimony. The things that give us the impetus to dig deeper, and now
yeah,
our whole community benefits from that terrible experience you went through because it jarred in your spirit a curiosity that led you to be productive instead of,
yeah,
again, just throwing in the towel. So
yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Count it all joy, as they say. As
Count
they
it
say in
all
the church,
joy.
it's real.
Yeah.
It's real. This is the Ancestral Rock on the Station for Progressive Information and handpicked quality music. For those of y'all joining us on YouTube and Facebook and the other social media apps right now, thank you for joining us. This recording will live with you there, and we invite you to share this with family that is interested in our global health and our collective health, as well as individual health. This affects everyone on an individual level. And what we found through the study of history is that when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion
I love that.
or a dragon, So that's just ancient culture. And that's part of our ancient philosophy that keeps us going. Again, before we get back into some of these global talks, I
Sure.
heard our beloved sister Sunny Patterson
Mhm.
mention that what you all were doing at the Algiers Ancestor Fest, which is such a powerful event. I've been there twice now, and it's just something that just charges you.
And we love
Um,
having you. Thank you so much for supporting.
I'm
Thank you.
grateful. I'm grateful for the fact that y'all are doing it, so we can have something like this to support, which just sustains us all. So
Mm.
she mentioned that y'all are dealing with the Ancestor Fest because of the fact that you're fighting climate change. That might not have been the way she said it, but
Sure.
I want to ask you to help us connect those dots because those seem like two absolutely different worlds. We're doing rituals over here
Yeah.
and playing the drums and singing ancient songs and all this kind of stuff. What
Yeah.
that got to do with climate change? What's the connection?
Everything. I mean, as you know, everything is connected. There is no
Mm,
disconnect. And one of the biggest disservices and lies that we ever accepted is that these things are not connected, that there is
mm,
no connection, right?
mm,
Um, and so, everything is systemic. It's all connected. We're on this land that is made up of our ancestors, and we're pounding the earth. We're saying our prayers. We're cleansing the air. We're clearing the air.
mm,
You know what I mean? Because Sunny says something really interesting that I think is so true. Um, we have to put on our protection,
mm,
and our our culture is our protection.
mm, mm,
You know, those ancestors in that land, in that levee, um, how did they survive? the terrible conditions that they did so that we could be here, right?
Mhm.
Like, it may seem grim. No, it is grim. We may go through grim things,
Mhm.
but that festival reminds us that we win,
Yes.
that we survive, that we win.
Yes.
No matter what's been thrown at us to remove us or exterminate us,
Right.
it
It's,
doesn't. It
yeah.
doesn't. And it's so we connect those dots because we have to pull on and tap into the wisdom and the power of those who came before to help us navigate current times and crises.
For sure. Yeah, I heard Mama Marimba Ani one time say something I often quote. Culture is our immune system. Culture is a people's immune system.
Absolutely.
It has very practical, very tangible ramifications in terms of how people navigate in the world. It's not just something that's off to the side,
Mm-mm.
extracurricular. Yeah, yeah, real
Absolutely.
talk. So before we mentioned before we came on, we were off the mic that there's a conference going on right now. And when I'm asking you for updates on these conferences, we're just
Sure.
attempting to get to the grassroots because, of course, with the corporate media, we don't get this information.
Hmm.
Like, what
Right.
are these governments talking about? What is the type of pressure? So before you kind of give us an update or give us a little kind of a snapshot of what's happening right now at the global conference.
Hmm.
One of the things we spoke about last time, which is actually part of a climate change curriculum that our organization is putting out to the family, and you were so generous with your information, with your knowledge in the interview that we did. We were talking about how even though basically, let me put it and I'm gonna summarize it, and please correct me if I got the summary wrong. Even though poor people, average everyday people didn't create the mess,
Hmm.
oftentimes you just demonstrated it with the Ogoni thing. They're the ones who got the burden of cleaning it up. And this
Yeah.
is even in terms of global negotiations. Even in terms of when these big bad USA and Canada and all these people who got all this money for war and sending billions of dollars to for
Yeah.
genocide and everything, they're still expecting the average everyday person to bear the brunt of this. you
Absolutely.
know and we were speaking about that in the context of even me asking the question, okay, well, what can the average person do? How can we shift our lifestyle?
Hmm.
How can we shift our daily routine in order to make this world a little bit more not just enjoyable but habitable,
Right.
for our children. And so the question came up even during the COVID, what I call the pandemic.
Yeah.
I remember how so many people, there became this big discussion that got into classism and all kind of other stuff,
Mm.
where some people would be like, look, we need to follow the protocols. It's irresponsible for you to be outside doing anything. We need to follow these protocols that Fauci and these other people are um, are 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 implementing. You know what I'm saying? And then other people would be like, nah, this is my lifestyle. This is my livelihood. I gotta be at the market every day because I don't eat if I don't. And you telling me it's irresponsible? So this whole question, so many things came out of that whole thing. It's like
Yeah.
here we are telling poor people what to do with their lives after they didn't create the mess that we're now in.
Yeah.
So with that long preamble of a backdrop, help us bring us up to date on what, from your perspective, of what
Yeah.
these recent climate talks have really addressed. If there's been any kind of progress in your mind, you know.
Yeah. Well, United Nations UN has a global climate conference every year at this time.
Mhm.
Right now, it's going on in a place called Baku. Um, it's like kind of Eurasianish.
Mm.
So over in that area of the globe, and the focus this year is supposed to be on finance. because, you know, how to get it? Okay. So there are funds that are supposed to be able to help different governments and different areas
Hmm.
start to take on the climate crisis. So there's the Green Climate Fund that focuses mostly on mitigation. And mitigation means keeping the carbon out of the air,
Hmm.
either cleaning it out, like carbon sequestration, which is not a thing actually, or not emitting it. Right. So that's Green Climate Fund. Then there's something called the Adaptation Fund, which is which governments, world governments agreed to fund. They created it and agreed to fund it, but won't fund it. These funds become pawns in global negotiations around all kinds of things. But those who are depending on adaptation funds are mostly in the global south, places that
Hmm.
aren't emitting much carbon, but are dealing with the brunt of the car the changes that are happening in climate. Okay, so they need to adapt. They don't need to focus on funding for keeping it out of the air. They're not emitting anything. They're not causing the crisis,
Hmm.
but they do have to adapt to it. So there's also an adaptation fund. Last year, there was the creation of another fund called Loss and Damage Fund, and that was mostly led by small island nations who, again, didn't cause the crisis, but can't adapt to the crisis. They go straight off the cliff into loss and damage.
Hmm.
They're sinking. The fishing has changed. They can no longer support themselves and life on their in their areas. They're going straight into loss and damage. And so there's a fund called the Loss and Damage Fund that was created, again, that global, again, that no one's paying money into, that's
Mm.
supposed to help them. Okay. So the
That no one's
finance,
paying money into. You should, for those of y'all listening, you got to see this black woman's face. the classic,
man,
the classic
yeah.
black woman's face, the face of
Yes.
justice.
They
Good
have
God.
all agreed. They all agreed to pay money into it,
Mm.
but now they're not paying money into it. And it's because they hold these funds hostage when they're talking about tariffs, when they're talking about um, when they're negotiating over other things. They hold these funds and these areas that depend on the funds hostage. Um, so the funds are like pawns now, politically. But so in Baku this year, the theme of this uh, conference, this COP, Conference of the Parties. So it's
Hmm.
where all the world governments meet in this one place and decide what's going to go on with the environment for the next year.
Hmm.
What will they all agree to? And so finance is supposed to be the focus, and it's still going on. It doesn't end until the 22nd. So I actually don't know what the outcomes will be
Right,
yet. So I don't know if we're making progress. But the fact that the US just elected a president that is a climate denier
right.
and that pulled us out of the Paris Agreement last time doesn't bode well, because we are the largest emitter and we're the largest contributor to most of the funds. So I'm pretty sure that most of the world, other governments in the world, are scrambling to figure out what is the impact going to be if the US decides that we're just not going to participate
Hmm.
in what everyone else in the world has agreed on is the plan for how we're going to save life on this planet, is really what it is.
It comes down to that simple. So
Yeah.
again, there's the question before us is how does the voice of the people really manifest itself in a tangible way,
It's
which
revolution. Honestly,
Mhm.
what you're doing is what we have to do. You, Baba, what you are doing is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to go back to ways that make sense for living, that support life, We know what doesn't support life. We've been doing it for a really long time now, right? The
Mhm.
data's out. We know what works and what doesn't. And when I was in Ogoni land, there's no potable water there.
Mm.
Now, this is the same place that creates so much wealth for the rest of Nigeria. Go
Mhm.
straight to Abuja, right? So much wealth for the rest of the country, and for multinational corporations, created billions and billions and trillions of dollars of wealth. They have no potable water. They have no systems that can keep them from from being underwater part of the year. That, you know what I mean? There's so much poverty in a place that creates 80% of the wealth.
Mhm.
So what can people do? I could see someone who is short-sighted and not thinking deeply, going there and being like, I can't believe they live like this and they're drinking bottled water made out of plastics, and don't they know that that is a side effect of, like they're leading into their own demise.
Mhm.
But these people didn't choose this.
Mhm.
They're given false solutions. They're given false choices.
Mhm.
If they want to drink water because their water sources have all been poisoned, then they are only given, they're not provided glass jars for clean water. They're provided plastic for clean water.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with us. You know, it really is going to take a revolution of everyday people to say, we're not going to participate in all these false solutions that are given to us. Whether you drink out of a plastic straw or a bamboo straw is not going to get it, right?
Mhm.
Almost every I look around my apartment, my apartment, my house, I'd say 50 to 60% of the things in here have some plastic in them. It's what's available to me. You know, if I want a hard top suitcase, it's going to be made out of plastic. If I
Mhm.
go to the hospital, and if I have an emergency, I had cancer maybe 2 years ago, and I went through extensive surgery.
Mhm.
Um, I wasn't like, hey, what is this? Is this plastic hanging here giving me these medications? Like, what is going
Mhm.
on? It's what's provided to us.
Mhm.
It's almost like we can't opt out of the system that is actually killing us. So if we're going to accept what's provided to us, then we're going to be on this road to destruction.
This roller coaster, yeah. Not even a roller coaster. This doggone mudslide.
Yeah, to
Because
destruction.
a roller coaster at least goes up and down. Yeah,
If we accept what's provided to us, that's
that's
the
the key.
crux of it.
Yeah, that's the
If we
key.
accept what's provided, because we're not going to be provided what's necessary for life. We're not going to be.
But if we don't accept, well, there's a famous graphic that I usually share on my social media from time to time, where just to paint the picture for those who can't see it, there's a crowd of people, and there's this one person with a whip that
Mm,
has all this whole crowd of people under subjugation. And then
yeah,
the next frame shows when the people turn around,
yeah,
and then this guy is bowing to the crowd. I mean, and we've heard it in so
absolutely.
many different ways. The Black Panther Party just celebrated another anniversary. Used to, and other people in that movement used to say power to the people.
Yeah,
And then someone who definitely influenced so many of us and manifested this localized climate change in terms of the positive aspect of that term. That's
yeah.
Imam Jamil, H. Rap Brown. He's still in prison right now
Mm,
because of the work that he's done. He changed the discourse, or he uplifted the discourse and said the power is in the people.
yeah,
And to me, those things are so significant because in this society, you just said something so profound right there in terms of, we accept what's given to us. So if we accept this narrative of us being separate from our power and us being just spectators and all that, that's part of it. So even with our good intentions, we end up playing into this narrative. We say the power is
Absolutely.
in the people. They're putting the power back in our hands. So as you mentioned, like the things that we're doing. I remember that the UN published something 10 years ago now about how small scale farming is something that will change, that will be not just change, but what they said will be something that will be more viable, make it more viable for humans to continue to sustain themselves on this planet. So I want to give some theories that have been thrown out there. The pressure test, with Dr. Cherelle Blazer, climate scientist, cultural worker, black magic woman, all of that. Person who definitely is a lover of her people and is attempting to be on the right side of history. One of them you just mentioned already, kind of stepped on a lot of toes. We said carbon sequestration
Oh,
is not a thing.
it is not.
So it's not a thing. So help us understand why it's not a thing.
Well, the technology isn't viable. It's extremely expensive, and no one's been able to make it work. But, you know, governments and here, governments and multinational corporations are almost the same thing now.
Hmm.
If people don't know that, you should know.
Hmm.
Okay. So, and they want they're not only manufacturing the problem, they want to manufacture the solution. Again, this thing about if we accept what's given to us, right? Um, so they're coming up with these engineering fixes to a natural problem that they can continue to get rich from, right? They don't want to go out of business. They want to make money from fixing the problem as well. So they come up with these engineering solutions, even though there are natural solutions.
Hmm.
Um, and carbon sequestration is one where you pull carbon out of, in theory,
Hmm.
pull carbon out of the air, pressurize it, and pump it underground and somehow find a way of keeping it underground, right? Through extreme pressure. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons, but they also want to use it to extract more oil and gas. So they want to use that pressurized carbon to push more oil and gas. It's ridiculous.
Right.
It makes sense on no level.
I'm glad.
Um,
I'm glad I asked you that because
yeah.
the way that carbon sequestration was introduced to me was actually by organic farmers
Mm,
who are promoting it from the perspective similar to what I feel you're saying in terms of small people doing small things, turning it into big things.
yeah.
If the momentum is spread. So using mulch, using wood chips, and
Yeah.
adding more organic matter to the soil, which would be a form of the sequestration of carbon. So you're saying that that's
No,
not what
that
it is.
okay. I really wish that they would not co-opt the language, the engineered language.
Hmm.
Because when governments talk about carbon sequestration, they're talking about this engineered way of capturing carbon from the air and pumping it underground
Hmm.
to aid in more extraction.
Hmm.
When farmers talk about it, unfortunately, they're using the same language, which can be very confusing
Hmm.
for the layperson.
Hmm.
I don't know if someone thought it was cute or witty or what, but they should probably stop because it's what they're calling carbon sequestration is a very different thing. Um, and maybe it could be that the engineers took the wording from
That's what
arborists
that,
and
that's that, that,
the
that's
forest.
what I was just getting ready to ask you. Could it be that because
Yeah,
that's something we've seen, in through
absolutely.
history, the
Yeah,
co-option of our language. Like the other day we were having this
yeah.
debate about this whole thing of inclusion. I'm like, man, keep your inclusion. And my sister was like, no, nothing wrong with inclusion, but I'm not talking about it from the perspective of the grassroots people, forming this beloved community. I'm talking about it
Mm,
from how it's pushed to us as this poison, this
mm,
illusion of inclusion. So
yeah,
now you got a black head of state, a black face of the empire. So we're all feeling included. So when our human spirit was telling us to separate from this mess and draw a line in the sand, now no, we're all together again. So that's a powerful point you raised. I'm glad I asked the question because
Yeah.
oftentimes there's people in so-called high places and powerful places with big budget that pay close attention
Oh,
to the
yes.
culture of our people, the everyday people, and they're so great at making us feel like it's nothing,
Yeah.
while they're using it for their thing.
Oh,
So
there's a
they'll,
psychology of it. Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
interesting. So another thing that's out there that may be a myth. I'm asking you to. We're giving it the pressure test. Is that one of the main causes of the global climate shift in a negative way is things like the aerosols, basically our lifestyle, things that we use every day as a convenient lifestyle. So you mentioned plastics, aerosols, and then there was a lot of discourse around what industry is really causing the biggest dent in the climate's health in terms of even like the ozone layer and all of that.
Mm,
Which is a whole other discussion in itself,
yeah.
in a sense. But one I remember when it was said that California probably had one more year of water.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know what happened to that. This was like 7, 8 years ago.
Okay.
I guess they found some more water
I guess
somewhere.
so. Yeah.
But the main source being the Colorado River.
Mm.
And they were saying that it's the almond industry
Oh,
that
yeah.
is the biggest culprit in this. Then other people push back, and there have been films made. I don't remember the names of them right now. Documentaries made that said no, it's actually the cattle industry that's
Mm,
one of the biggest contributors to the climate crisis. Do
mm.
you have any data on that? Would you be able to refute that or substantiate that claim?
I mean, they're both. Here's the thing: as resources become more scarce, we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna start pointing fingers at everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the cows. Oh, it's the almonds. The truth is, we should be able to grow food and sustain animal. You know what I mean? Like we should be able to sustain agriculture, and all of what you're talking about is agriculture industry. And um, as you know, the corporatization of big ag
Mm-hmm.
is, does play a big part in climate change. On many levels, not just carbon getting into the air or methane getting into the air, but of course, water quality,
Mm-hmm.
soil quality, all of those things. Um, yeah. So,
So, what would you, as you've done your research, as you have observed, if you've listened to governments, talking heads, you've seen grassroots people, you've been a part of those conversations.
yeah.
If you had to give us a top three list of, first of all, a list of contributors to the mess, and then some things that we can do other than roll over and play dead,
Yeah.
that can help us to have a sense of working towards mitigation of the mess. But starting with, what would you say? I mean, I just threw off a few that
Mm,
are part of the popular mythology. This and
sure.
this and this. These are what is causing these things. What would you say globally are the main contributors at this point? I mean, I wanna highlight what you said, which is so important, that the madness that we're dealing with now in terms of the shift in the climate is
Hmm.
is is harvest from 30, 40 years ago. That's
Yeah.
first. So that's something in itself. So with that being said, what would you say? What would you point to in terms of some of the leading contributors to the madness?
Okay. So I have to stick with systems
Hmm.
because there's no silo. Again, pointing your finger at one or the other, it's almost like doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
Um, so capitalism.
Period.
Capitalism is the culprit. The corporatization of big ag. That's a capitalist system. The way that the petrochemical industry is allowed to, um, without impunity, just release toxins into the air, into the water and the soil. That's capitalism. So yeah, I would say capitalism is the biggest system that is destroying our environment unchecked. Um, and the other question, what can we do? What you talk about, changing our lifestyle. Again, we're given a lot of false solutions, but every time we can find a way to opt out of what's provided to us, we
Hmm.
are getting closer to um, correcting. Do you remember
I mean, that's
during?
powerful, and that seems very tangible to me. That doesn't seem like some kind of pipe dream that you're selling us
Oh
to
no,
make us feel a little bit better. Opting out of what is given to us, because what comes with that is also creating something different, creating the alternative,
yeah,
which is something we've always done.
absolutely. And the alternative exists. Again, Baba, you live this,
True.
so you're a fantastic example of what can be done. Um, but I was wondering, do y'all remember during the pandemic when everything shut down and systems began to repair themselves?
Hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. That
People
same that
need to
same that
remember
same
that.
springtime. I was telling you about how generally in Georgia now it gets a little warm. It comes out of winter in March,
Mm,
but then we don't really have a real spring
yeah,
because it goes from the gradual warming into the spike.
yeah.
So by the time Malcolm X's birthday come around, which is the end of May, we feeling like summertime.
Yes.
But that year, 2000, was the
Mm,
first time in so many years that we had a real spring because everything shut down.
mm, yeah.
So I know that I know that for a fact.
That's how
Mm-hmm.
quickly the earth will begin to repair itself
Mm-hmm.
if we stop poisoning it. That's how quickly we can turn this around. That's how quickly we can go back to supporting life. So it's not a pipe dream. If we can win, when we opt out of what's being provided to us by corporations and governments that in the short term are benefiting financially, capitalism, from the demise, we the, the quality of life on this planet would get better almost instantaneously.
Mm-hmm. That's real. Now I'm not asking you to be a politician.
Sure.
Um, I want to ask you though, in a real sense, as a scientist
Mm,
and as a human being who lives, who has just like the rest of us basic needs and everything. What do we say to, for instance, like people in Guyana who have not seen the negative effects yet, are in a political struggle to get the government to do the right thing in terms of even sharing the oil. I mean, the government of Guyana, if I'm not mistaken, gets $1 billion a day, Guyana dollars a day
yeah.
in oil revenue, and the people are still suffering.
Yeah.
So for somebody like that who been suffering all their lives under regime after regime after regime, and now here comes this natural resource that's always been there that seems like it could do more good
Mm,
than bad.
mhm.
In the because especially because we're looking at things in a immediate survival mode kind of situation.
Yeah.
What what do the scientists of the world like yourself who have not only the interest of the planet, but ultimately the interest of the planet because the interest of the people.
Yeah.
How do we address those types of situations, those scenarios?
Well, here's the thing. What's going on in Guyana is nothing new, and governments and the petrochemical industry, oil and gas industry, do not change their playbook. The same thing that's happening in New Orleans or in Louisiana, southern Louisiana, is what's being experienced or what y'all are going to experience. Same thing that happened in Ogoniland.
Hmm.
Same thing that happened in what is it, Mozambique. I mean, same. It's always exactly the same. It doesn't work. Same thing in Texas in the Barnett Shale. It's always exactly the same. It's
Hmm.
not hard to know what the outcome will be. All you have to do is take off your tunnel vision and look to your neighbor. That's why community and culture are so important. All you have to do is look at other communities who have fallen for the same line, the same promise of capitalism.
Mhm.
Um, and you can see exactly what your future holds
You can
if
see
you go there.
the long line
Oh,
of disappointment and heartbreak.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's you can't not know.
Mhm.
It's willful ignorance to think that it's going to work differently for you than it has worked for anybody else on the planet.
Jeez. Whew, that gives me chills, but not chills. Not chills that don't motivate me. it's just,
Yeah,
it's willful ignorance.
yeah,
It's true. It's true. You know, I'm very comforted in the fact that, as Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey reminded us, what humans have done, humans can do.
yes.
I don't know how many apocalyptic systems and scenarios we've survived that are more dramatically
Mm,
inhumane than chattel slavery,
yeah,
but we came through that and came out of that as our storytellers are now reminding us to make sure we get the narrative right.
absolutely.
Even in the Turtle Island context, you know, in the North American context, we came out of that with many Black Wall Streets all over the place. We came out of
Yeah,
that with Reconstruction until there was an invasion. So we have this in us
yeah,
to get not just get through, but to rise above it. I really appreciate your specificity. I think that's the word. Y'all know
yeah,
the word I'm trying to say
yes.
about language and how language is important. How
Mm,
we use words like resilience and from that to carbon sequestration and all that that can give the wrong message depending on our context. So for
mm.
me as an activist, that is a charge to continue to develop our language,
Ah, yes,
as many social movements are doing, to
yes,
continue to develop our language, to make sure that our language stays relevant. Um, and just the reflection that you've given in terms of not what the governments of the world are doing, because we already know what they're up to. As Bob Marley said one thing, every
yeah.
government in the world is illegal.
Mm, that part.
I don't, I haven't found much evidence to refute that. But we also know that grassroots people all over the world want to live and are finding ways, to
Hmm.
to push life forward. So
I love
very,
that.
very, very grateful for your time with us today, for your giving of yourself.
And
You
I'm
know,
grateful for you, Baba, for this platform, for the work that you do, for the example that you're setting. Yeah, the work that you do is how we're going to get through this. So thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to come by anytime.
absolutely. We've been speaking with Dr. Cherelle Blazer. Is there any social media or email or any way that you desire for people to get in touch with you if people want to link in, touch in, maybe see some of your work, some of your writings? Uh,
Sure. I don't live online enough. In fact, I'm trying to correct that now. So I don't have enough resources online, but you can chat me on Facebook and I will definitely respond. That's an easy way. You can also email me at my name, Cherelle.blazer@gmail.com.
spell that for us,
Um,
please.
say again. Oh, Cherelle.Blazer, like a jacket or a truck. Okay. So Cherelle.blazer@gmail. Or you can also get in touch with me at Instagram. It's my name. It's just my name.
Okay, excellent.
Um, but chatting me on Facebook is actually the easiest.
Excellent.
Yeah, the easiest way.
Well, thank you so much, Mama, and we continue the great work. You're inspiring us to stay focused. To aim. There's some people. Again, there's a whole heap of people I think about all the time. I ain't calling none of y'all names, but y'all know who you are. But some people we have a joke about, because of just how they move. They're ready, fire, aim, but ready, aim, fire makes more sense.
Mm.
So helping us to focus the fire is a great gift. So we
Mm.
appreciate, love you, and
Thank you.
we're looking forward to talking to you again soon.
All right.
All right, much love.
See ya.
Family, stay tuned to yourself. on your station for progressive information and handpicked quality music. Continue to support the voice of the people, which is your voice, and do that in very tangible ways. You know, we at WRFG are here, and we're able to do what we do because we're not funded by any of those people who poison the environment and all of that. We're funded by the grassroots, and we have maintained this, we have sustained this for over 50 years. I don't need to tell you anything else in terms of what that means in terms of our potential. So continue to support yourself, support your voice, as our elder Nana Fukia would tell us all the time. Simba Simbi, hold up that which holds you up. More love. Free the land.